So hello everyone, we are in our last meeting this year, and today we are going to talk about who was the spirit that communicated with Divaldo Pereira Franco and brought to us this wonderful books of the psychological series that we have been using together with Jungian knowledge, okay? I'll just start sharing my screen with you. Is that okay? Mariana, yes? All right, so today's meeting is about a spirit's journey, Joanna de Angelis and her mission. So in the book Reflecting the Soul, chapter 1 by Cesar Said, he says that knowing details of a life is always useful as long as this knowledge allows us to reflect on our own existence, especially a life that is lived with solidarity, can be a fruitful source of inspiration and brings us encouragement in the continuation of our personal struggles. So that's one of the reasons that we present, and of course, Joanna presented herself to Divaldo and also talked about some of her lives, okay? So the author says that the lives of this beloved and admired soul, known by all of us as Joanna de Angelis, were not characterized solely by decisions and acts of immense courage in their uniqueness, but were also marked by choices and inclinations aimed at the community. The religiosity that this heart developed over 2 millennia of struggles, sacrifices, and transformations that it sought to imprint on its own individuality, animating different personalities, is a religiosity more focused on a way of being than on a way of believing. It is more relational than devotional. And I think this is very, very important. We have been talking about this, right? That to educate ourselves, discovering ourselves. All this course this year is about self-discovery, right? We have talked a lot about some of Jung's major concepts, and Joanna uses a lot of them. But putting together, making a bridge between what we know about psychology in this realm, let's say, of that we are living at this moment in a personality with our physical bodies. So everything that we have developed as analysts and as psychologists, people in general, philosophers, reflecting about ourselves, about our lives, but also considering ourselves as spirits, immortal spirits, and the possibility of reincarnation and living different lives in different personalities. And how does that impacts our lives, our psyche, and our psychic dynamics, right? The dynamics of our unconscious. So we have been talking about all of that this year. And Joanna always says that it's very important not only to think, reflect about ourselves, but to work in our own emotions and especially change our behaviors, right? If you remember in the first meetings and for people that have been watching or maybe is watching for the first time the end. Some people like to skip to the end, so I strongly advise to go back to the first classes. Then you can all take a look at what Joanna says about the energies of life, our will, our potentials of development. We have been talking about all of that. So it is very important, and that's the example that when we study everything that Joanna talked about to Divaldo about her different personalities, some of them, of course, different lives that she has lived, we can see, remember that we have been talking about individuation process, how we become whole, how we put in a oneness our different experiences. Not only, of course, we are talking about this life, individuation in this life, but when we consider the spirits, then we are talking also about, we could say, the individuation of the spirit, our spiritual path, our awakening for the richness, all the potentials of our souls, of our spirits also. And it's our awakening that we know that a lot of people are undergoing, because we are in times of transitions. We are in times of illuminating our shadows individually and collectively, so that we can evolve together and vibrate in a different way, so that we can individuate together also, not only as individuals, but collectively, okay? And really go to what we call a regenerate world, where we don't have to suffer anymore to learn. We can learn by reflecting, by experiences, but without so much suffering. So to achieve that, we have to undergo the self-discovery. We have to undergo we have to find the courage to face our shadows, to face the truth in our hearts and minds, and to change behavior with ourselves and with among all of us, right? So a life that a spirit that is, not that different from all of us, and that has undergone and is undergoing her own individuation process, is very relevant as a model for all of us. As many wonderful souls, when they give us stories of their own past lives, stories of their own experiences of growth and enlightenment, we can really say, well, that's not that far from myself. I can achieve that too. If I struggle with myself, with my bad inclinations, let's say, with my shadows, I can achieve. So we all can achieve that. And it's very important when we talk about Jung's concept of religion, that we said that his concept of religion was not the Latin term religare, that it's to connect with something outside of ourselves. When we go to temple, churches, spiritual services, but when we connect to what somebody else is talking about, the transcendent one, about God, about the spiritual realms. But when I do the Latin term, that it's much more ancient, religere, with E in the end, that it's to reconnect with something within ourselves, the power that is within ourselves, the our spiritual power, let's say, the richness, our spiritual potential, the light that is within ourselves, the knowledge that is within ourselves. So that was more the concept, Jung's concept of religiosity, and also Joanna's. Okay, so what Cesar is saying here in this wonderful chapter, the first chapter of the book, Reflecting the Soul, it has Joanna is talking about religiosity more in a relational than a devotional way. Okay, so he says that the religious proposal that she assimilated and operationalized in her various reincarnations was directed towards the social, to help the afflicted, to care for the poorest, the sick, the oppressed, and the unbalanced, aiming to alleviate their suffering. So 2 millennia of struggles, because Joanna's first life that she talks about to Divaldo is as Joan of Cusa, 68 AD. Okay, we don't know when she was born, and we know that there is some very quick reference to her in the Bible, in the Old Testament, I think, or in the, I think, New Testament. So in Capernaum, she was the wife of the steward Cusa, an employee of Herod Antipas. She sought the consolation of Jesus, who recommended her to follow him from a distance. She had a lot of troubles with her husband, who was, if you remember, Herod Antipas was a very dark moment in history. And he was, so the Cusa, the steward Cusa, was always in the middle of the Romans and of the Jews, trying to please both groups, trying to earn money and power. So he was very materialist and very worried with power and money. And Joan of Cusa felt, really depressed, really stuck in that, in a sadness, in a lack of meaning and sense in her life, seeing all that the husband did. So she seeks Jesus through her slave, one personal slave that she had, that had become a Christian. That happened a lot, okay? And Christ asked her to carry the verb of the gospel, the clarification of truth. And he says, also strive in silence, and when called to clarification, speak the sweet or energetic word of salvation, depending on the circumstances, he says to her. And in this life, she had 2 children. She told Divaldo that the eldest was Divaldo Franco. There is no historic, register of this eldest son. But there is from the youngest son, Newton, that she told it was Newton de Souza, who was Divaldo's best friend in this life and helped Divaldo to build Mansão do Caminho, that we are going to see a little bit of this wonderful project. And we know by history accounts that she dies burned to the stake with her children. But we know that there are descriptions that this youngest asked her to deny Jesus, to say, because she had turned turned Christian. And so she is burned to the stake. She's taken like the first Christians to die if she doesn't deny Jesus. And the youngest of the brothers ask her to deny Jesus for him because he was suffering. He was also at the stake. And she doesn't deny Jesus. So it's something really hard for a mother to see her own child, her own children, actually, we know now because of Joanna, die, but she doesn't deny Jesus, okay? So the second life, but actually it's we have Divaldo told some people that this was the last incarnation that she told Divaldo about, because it was kind of difficult to talk about Clare of Assisi, because we know that it's a very relevant and important to Catholics, and she was kind of, going little by little. And this was during, I'm sure, many years that she started little by little telling him about her past lives, these past lives that, and also all in a contexts, sorry, that, to teach him a spirit, a loving spirit, a light spirit never tells things without a purpose. It's not as we have, we talk about our personas, we talk about things that we think are okay about ourselves. But of course, a spirit living already in spiritual realms, elevated ones, are not going to talk about things that are not important to anyone that is listening and that wants to listen, right? And important in a sense of awakening to the spiritual reality, to help us evolve, and never to talk about importance of anyone, because the importance that we have is the light that we carry, is the spiritual values that we develop. That's the importance that, let's say, being redundant, is the really importance in the spiritual realms, because it's the light that we carry of loving, of loving each other, of spiritual wisdom, of moral development, things like that. And of course, knowledge that we can achieve in this life and in our past lives. This is what is really important when we go back to spiritual realms, right? And everything else, the importance, our personas, the supposed importance, celebrities and things like that, or supposed achievement in this life that really don't matter for our spiritual purpose. They stay in this life. It's like, who cares, if it's not important to our spiritual evolutions. We, even ourselves, we are going to forget, oh, okay, this was that, only that belongs to that personality, but it's not relevant. So it's totally another mindset. So she knew that Clara of Assisi was very important, to Catholics, to different religions in this life of ours, still very material, even if we are struggling to be more spiritual, but to develop the reasoning and to accompany Joanna in her spiritual individuation, let's say. And so first we have Joan of Cusa, and then we have Clare of Assisi. Of course, there are other incarnations probably, but not that relevant for our education, okay? So Clare of Assisi, 1192 and 1250 to 12 53 when she dies. She was a disciple of Francis of Assisi, known by all of us in the West as Saint Francis of Assisi. Was born in 1182 and died in 1226. Her example was of falling Francis attracted other young women. She had this is in the Dark Ages, the Middle Ages, so she had her hair cut as a symbol of initiation. So it was like a ritual of passage, so a spiritual awakening. And to have the hair cut, remember, women used to wear long hair, and it was, a symbol of being beautiful, pretty, desire, femininity, things like that. So to have her hair cut very short was a symbol of initiation, leaving vanity, the material aspects of life behind. And she founded the Order of the Poor Clares and became an abbess, maintaining the customs of the time, including sleeping on the floor and fasting. She performed many cures during her life, spiritual cures, and passed away at the age of 59. And then I found this wonderful text by Clare of Assisi. She says, we become what we love, and who we love shapes what we become. If we love things, we become a thing. If we love nothing, we become nothing. Imitation is not a literal mimicking of Christ. Rather, it means becoming the image of the beloved, an image disclosed through transformation. This means we are to become vessels of God's compassionate love for others. Isn't that beautiful? And this is Saint Clare of Assisi. I found in Google Images looking for sayings of Saint Clare about Jesus. Okay, that's what I've put there. And we can, in this, when we face a spiritual truth, okay, we can find, let's say, the truth of that in different times. It's an archetype, a powerful archetype. Remember the transpersonal dimension of the psyche that Jung called the collective unconscious, that he himself called a transpersonal dimension, that we've been talking to Professor Lionel Corbett. And he says, yes, it's the transpersonal dimension of the psyche, the objective psyche, okay? So when a powerful archetype as the archetype of transformation, okay, the archetype of dying and death and rebirth, let's say, that Jesus, when he connects with the cosmic consciousness, with the Christ consciousness, and becomes the Christ. And Jung says imitation of Christ, Christ as a symbol of our God image, okay, of our understanding, the understanding that is possible for for all of us at this time of our evolution, okay, of our consciousness. And of course we are evolving, so this is going to keep transforming, evolving within ourselves, our God images, ourselves, our collective selves, okay? Everything that we have studied this year. So when something is truth in this transpersonal dimension, that it's out of space and time, but that we share as human beings, as brothers and sisters, evolving and developing together with these beautiful experiences that, different lives being able to reincarnate, to live different experiences from the masculine, the feminine, from being a child, being a young person, being an old person, being father, mother, sister, brother, being daughter, sons, grandpa, parents, aunts, and uncles, and so teachers, students, so many rich experiences that we are given the possibility to live in this life. So there is much love and light in evolution. And Claire of Assisi is talking about that. We become what we love. So let's pay attention of what we are loving. Are we loving money and power? If we are loving money and power in this life, the material energies that, put us apart from each other, set us apart from each other, we become that. And we become lost, as many people are lost, still believing that, I have to be rich, I have to have a lot of power, I have to make war, I have to struggle with anybody that, doesn't agree with me. Then we become that. And Saint Clare of Assisi, in the Middle Ages, the Dark Ages, is a light because she reconnects with Jesus that she had met as Joan of Cusa. And through her experience with Saint Francis of Assisi, So she understands, this understanding was within her soul, that if we love things, we become things. Her husband in that past life, Cusa, the steward, loved things. So he was becoming a thing. He was becoming this struggle to have power and to have money. And he was becoming that, and he died because of that, okay? And if we don't love anything, we become nothing at all. So the imitation, Jung talks about imitation of Christ. Imitation of Christ in the sense of psychological sense of accepting the suffering in this life that we have to experience because our spirit have asked for this experience, for instance, have asked for these challenges, okay, that our egos feel as suffering, okay, and mimic and try to imitate Christ. Jung talks about the imitation of Christ, okay? So you see, this is a spiritual truth. We have Clare of Assisi in the Dark Ages, in the Middle Ages, talking about, and Jung, like almost 800 years later, okay? 700 at least years later, talking about, from the psychological point of view, the imitation of Christ. Okay, the imitation in what sense? Imitation of being accepting and holding these different powers that try to set us apart within ourselves. There's a struggle between what is still darkness or shadow within ourselves and what is already light within ourselves that is trying to tells us, no, let's go this way. Let's have courage. Let's face our own darkness so that our light can grow and can shine even brighter, okay? So you see how different souls in different times of our history, in different periods, in different countries, doesn't matter, in different genders, okay, are talking about the same thing. Isn't that beautiful? Because it's a very powerful archetype. It's the archetype of unity. We say that the creation that we call God, the transcendent one, this source of creation that gives us life, gives us all these possibilities, gives us all this love and all this life, is within ourselves. So we can connect with this knowledge. It doesn't matter the space and time, as long as we try to reach it, try to reconnect, rebound with this source that it's also within ourselves, okay? Is manifesting in the depths of our souls, okay? So this means, as Claire of Assisi is telling us, this means we are to become vessels of God's compassionate love for others. So the alchemy has to happen within ourselves. Let's forget judgments. Let's forget of others for a while we are actually in this self-discovery process, okay? Because our seeing, our ability to see further has to be see further inside of our souls, not outside of our souls. This comes later on, okay? With an expanded ability, sight, an expanded ability to see. But this expanded ability is with our third eye, okay? Is the eyes of the soul, of our spirit. So let's go to her next reincarnation. Remember, this is what she think it's relevant for all of us, okay? We don't know other reincarnations. We know this for reincarnation. And remember that actually the number 4 is a number symbolizes totality, okay, in the individuation process. So it's very important that we are dealing with a lot of symbols here, okay? This is not about celebrity, it's not about idealization of anyone. Least of all, and I'm quite sure Joanna doesn't want us to pay reverence, you know, she wants us to try to think of ourselves and to, you know, just tells us, well, I have been there and I'm still walking the path and I'm here with you all, okay? So let's do it together if we can, if we connect, and if people that are listening to all of this think it's relevant for their own spiritual awakening and their spiritual evolution. So the next reincarnation that she tells about is like Juana Inés de la Cruz in Mexico in 1651 and she died in she was born in 1651 and she died in 1695. This is her religion pseudonym of the Mexican poet Juana de Asbaje Ramirez de Santillana. Sorry, I don't speak Spanish. The most that I can achieve is like we call here in Brazil a portunhol, that it's a mix of Portuguese with Espanol as we call Spanish, okay? Sorry about that, people that talk in Spanish. And we know that she was a precocious child. She attended classes from the age of 5. That was not common in that time. She became literate at the age of 6, and at the age of 12, she learned Latin in 12 classes and Portuguese alone by herself. She was a poet with a great thirst for knowledge. She was tested at the age of 15 by professors at the University of Mexico. At the age of 16, she entered the convent of the Discalced Carmelites, and that they were very ascetic, and there was a ascetic rigidity, we know that. And she was considered, as Juana Inés de la Cruz, she was considered the first feminist in South America, okay? And so she founds the Order of San Jerome of the Conception as Sor Joana Inés de la Cruz, and she lived in a comfortable cell surrounded by scientific books and musical instruments. She studied she studied a lot. She wrote her poems, essays, dramas, religious plays, Christmas carols, and sacred music in that life. European and New World intellectuals visited her to exchange knowledge and experiences. She was known as the library nun. And in 1695, she gave up her intellectual activity and went to take care for her religious sisters that were with the plague at that time. And then she succumbed at the age of 44, okay? She's considered a Mexican muse, and she is here to your right, you can see, in the 1,000 peso note, okay, in the Mexican money. And then, remember, in that past life, she learned Portuguese. So the spirit is also in different experiences, accumulating knowledge from different countries, different lives, different genders, different languages, right? And she tells Divaldo then she was born as Joanna Angélica de Jesus. In 1761, she was born and died in 1822. She's a martyr of Brazilian independence. She was born in Salvador, Bahia, where Divaldo was born. At 21, she entered the convent of Lapa as a Franciscan soror and later abbess. She worked welcoming young girls and women who were placed in the convent voluntarily or compulsorily also. And when Portuguese soldiers invaded the convent of Nossa Senhora da Lapa, Joanna, she was 60 years old, comes out at the convent's door. This is a movie, I put to you a picture of a movie representing the scene. At the convent's door, summoning them with the raised cross, saying that they will only enter over her corpse, her dead body. She resisted valiantly being bayoneted, okay? Giving the inmates time to escape, taking refuge through an underground passage in the convent because they were going to be raped by the Portuguese soldiers, okay? So she died protecting her sisters. And in September 7, 1822, it's the proclamation of the independence of Brazil. And in Bahia, Portuguese troops commanded by Brigadier Inácio Luiz Madeira de Melo resisted until 1823. So the struggle, the fight goes on for some months more. So in the spirits, sorry, in the spiritual realm, in the spirits realm, we have the book, we have Joanna working with spirits, high elevated spirits that were working with Allan Kardec. she told also Divaldo. This is a copy, there's in English, the Gospel According to Spiritism. It's a edition by the published in English. And so she joined the Spirit of Truth team. The Spirit of Truth is a hierarchy spirit that is said to be in the team, managing the team, that it was of high elevated spirits that were working, trying to send all the message that Allan Kardec and the studies that Allan Kardec was codifying in the Spiritist knowledge. Okay, so in the book, The Gospel According to Spiritism, there is a message that Joanna says to Divaldo. She was the author, that is called Patience. That's in chapter 9, item 7. And also another message that it will be given to those who have. That is chapter 18, items 13 to 15, people who have the gospel according to Spiritism can look to this two messages that are Joanna's was the author, okay, written by Joanna. And she planned the foundation also of Mansão do Caminho, is with the support of Francis of Assisi, as long as it never denied charity, as long as this, this Mansão do Caminho, this beautiful project that Divaldo and Newton developed in Bahia, in Salvador, as long as the project and all that it's, I'll show a little bit to you all, never denied charity for anyone, okay? So this is a little bit of Mansão do Caminho. It's the translation would be mention of the path. And it's mentioned not because it's anything rich or whatever, actually it's the opposite. It's mentioned because it's like the house of the path of the first Christians, the apostles. But it's mentioned because it's so big, and also there's a very wonderful story about a first house that they were able to buy very unexpectedly, doing a lot of work. But this is for another time that I can translate to you this beautiful story. And this is Divaldo and his friend Newton. I'm going to show a little bit more about them. In the year 2022, Mansão do Caminho, this beautiful project, was in anniversary of 70 years of its foundation. And it says here in Portuguese, come to learn and live to serve. Very beautiful. And in your life, you can you can see the first houses to help poor families and children, to educate children, and help orphan children also. Divaldo was father and Newton to a lot of orphan children, poor children, and to the right many houses in the way they are now 70 years later, with a lot of struggle, and in the left is a model of now all, I don't know if here you can see, all the houses and the schools and clinic also for families and women to give birth and take care of small children. And I have been there. It's really wonderful. I strongly advise people to go there and look by themselves, look with their own eyes. And this is the model. So to the right, you can see Mansão do Caminho here with all the buildings. And then a lot of, all that surrounds is a very poor area of Bahia in Salvador. So it helps, with food and health and education all this enormous community that surrounds it, doing a lot of charity. I'm quite sure, we can all we enter there and we really learn a lot. We feel the energy of a spiritual project, that it comes from above, let's say, comes from very elevated spiritual realms, and can be materialized here in this world by people of goodwill, of the that struggle to maintain, as Divaldo and his brother Newton, to maintain the right vibration, to work with their own shadows, to make their own lights stronger, and so vibrate in a way that can, really work with spirits, loving spirits and light teachers as Joanna de Angelis. So here's some pictures, and can find in the Google Images of some of work. We have Divaldo here to the right with the children, have been there. It's wonderful. They take care of very small, even very small babies, and children of different ages are educated, have health care, have food. And here to the right, bigger children learning and teenagers. And in the bottom, in Christmas, I think it was that I see when they give food for different families, poor families from Salvador. And also we have here, so Divaldo, the mentor, and her spokesperson, let's say, that is Divaldo. And he's saying knowledge is brought from the spiritual dimension, Divaldo says, to earth, and not the other way around. Okay, so we cannot, we are not able here to call, in a sense, also Chico Xavier would say the telephone, because he was not in the mobile at the time, Chico Xavier. He was previous to that, but he was the telephone, the ancient telephones, we say. But he would say the telephone rings from there to here, not from here to there, okay? And Divaldo is saying the same thing. Knowledge is brought from the spiritual dimension to earth, and not the other way around. So in 1947, and all people usually from Bahia, they laugh a lot about themselves. They are very happy, joyful people, and Divaldo is like that. So this is a kind of funny story. In 1947, he was very young, and he already could feel the presence of Joanna, but he didn't know it was Joanna. It was a mentor, let's say. And he could feel the presence, and sometimes hear and psychograph. And he wanted to know, who was his guide, who was the spirit. And she says, my son, why do you want to know who your guide is? He was very young. And he says, because everyone I know has a guide. Do I have it too? And she says, you have. Your guide is the greatest of all. It is Jesus. And he says, oh, but Jesus I don't want. He's everyone's guide. I want one just for me. He was very young, okay? And he already knew Chico Xavier. Chico Xavier was like 20 years older than him. And remember, we have been talking about this Chico Xavier also when he was very young. His guide appeared to him, that we all know now as Emmanuel. And later, Emmanuel tells him that of his first life that he wanted to tell Chico, like Joanna talking about that she was Joan of Cusa. But Emmanuel tells later on Chico Xavier, it's in 2000 years ago that we have been talking about the book. So 2000 years ago is the first incarnation that Emmanuel tells Chico about, his own reincarnation, Emmanuel's own reincarnation, as Publio Lentulus, a Roman senator. So I'm quite sure Divaldo knew that, and he wanted also to have an important guide, as Chico had Emmanuel. And let's not forget, and even I think Divaldo talks about that, he was a young boy in last century, so he was not very happy. He was, wanted to have someone important, as he thought that was important, as Chico Xavier had. So he said, oh, but Jesus, I don't want. He's everyone's guide. I want one just for me. So he was talking like, a teenager. And she says to him, Divaldo, stay with Jesus. He is the only fixed guide, because all guides change, but only Jesus remains. Remember that she has talked to Jesus herself in her reincarnation as Joanna of Cusa. And in 1956, almost 10 years later, they have this dialogue when he sees Joanna for the first time. The mentor, seeing Divaldo, so Joanna, seeing Divaldo still resentful, asks, what is your biggest sorrow, Divaldo? And he says, not knowing the name of my guide. He was insisting. See, our personality, our egos can be really stubborn sometimes. And she says, Divaldo, I'm not your guide. Again, as I always told you, I am a friendly spirit of yours. Now I ask you, what is more important, having a friendly spirit or having the important name of someone who is not a friend? Look at the way, a friendly spirit, a loving spirit, a light teacher is going to talk to us and try to teach us when we are in the flesh, in, young and or maybe immature, still immature part of the life cycle, and in a very calm, compassionate way, patient way, right? And Divaldo says, having a friendly spirit, he answers. But I wanted to combine the two things. Since you are a friendly spirit of mine, give me your name. So he was very smart, okay? And she says, okay, you want a name? Well, in my last reincarnation, I lived experiences in a female body. What is the name, he asks. And she says, call me Joanna. And then Divaldo Divaldo wasn't very pleased. He did not expect a female spirit, and the name Joanna was very common. Remember, this was last century, and Divaldo was still a young man. And his model was Chico Xavier, who had already said and written psychograph books by Emmanuel, the Roman senator. Of course, Emmanuel also said that right in the next reincarnation, he comes as a slave, but who cares, right? Everybody likes to idealize, and when we are still in the shadow, connected to our shadows, to a sense of power, of importance. Oh, to connect with the Roman senator. Well, he learned much more being a slave later on, and actually was the beginning of his individuation in the wonderful book 50 years later. So let's pay attention of what these wonderful spirits are telling about their own experiences with their own shadows and process of enlightenment, okay? And So Divaldo did not expect a female spirit, and the name Joanna was very common. Noticing his disappointment, Joanna asked, "Didn't you like the name?" "Yes, I liked it, ma'am, but I wanted a more sonorous name." And she said, "Well, then call me Joanna de Angelis." Divaldo started to hear her and see her in the guise of a nun for the first time. So I also wanted to point out that being a nun, okay, it's Divaldo was a Catholic when he was very young. He was from a very Catholic family in Bahia, okay, the state up in the north of Brazil, actually where Brazil starts. And the thing is that, so I'm quite sure that Joanna presents herself as a nun, not only because we have seen that being a nun actually was a way for women in the past to have access access of knowledge, to knowledge, to information, possibility of studying. You know how she studied a lot in her Mexican life because she was able to have a library to have books, and so this was important, quite important, I think, not only because of the connection of with Clare of Assisi, so not because of religion as we lived in a very close-minded way up until recently, and some people still believe and still live this kind of religion, but because it was important in the lives that she lived, okay? So I think this is very important because uh, a lot of people like very much to imagine Joanna as a nun, but she appears to Divaldo, he talks about, in a light dress, in a white dress, very common, very simple, and many times not as nun. But I think that was like strategic and also a connection and a model for her to tell all of us the different lives that she lived. Okay, so Joanna writes the psychological series, and we have here 16 volumes that are being translated to English. 50 years of some of them have already been translated and are being, retranslated or work better, and being a new edition is coming in a few months. So look for that. So 50 years of studying psychoanalysis, psychology, and psychiatry in the spiritual world, she tells Divaldo. She tries to make a bridge between contemporary psychology and spiritist knowledge in a compatible and accessible language. Accessible after we study a lot, but she knows we have to study because it's a strategy, people, because it's getting knowledge. We learn about a lot of psychology and about ourselves. This meetings, this course this year was all about self-discovery, because we have to learn a little bit of Freud, a lot about Jung. Sometimes we see she makes reference of other scholars, of other psychologists and other philosophies, also like other religions like Buddhism, for instance. Okay, so it's accessible since as long as we study. So we have to work for our personal development and our evolution, and in full accordance with the basic postulates of Spiritism, the belief that are what? The belief in God, the transcendence, the transcendent one, the unity, the source of life, in the immortality of the soul, in the communicability of of the spirits, in reincarnation, and in the plurality of inhabited worlds. So in the psychological series, we know that Allan Kardec established, when Joanna talks about that, Allan Kardec established in the Genesis, that is already translated to English, that Spiritism and science complement each other reciprocally. Since science, without Spiritism, finds it's impossible to explain certain phenomena only through the laws of matter. Spiritism without science would lack support and proof. Okay? Science and Spiritism walk hand by hand. In the Spiritist magazine founded by Allan Kardec in 1958, he gives it the subtitle of Journal of Psychological Studies. In 1958, we know that, Freud was being born, and psychology was being born with, Freud in that century. Sorry, in 1858. Sorry, it's wrong there. And he gives, so in 1858, he gives it the subtitle of Journal of Psychological Studies, implying the importance of studying the soul, incarnated spirit, as a whole and not in parts. So Joanna follows the steps of, of course, Allan Kardec. She was a spirit that was working with other spirits, as we've seen, trying to help Allan Kardec to codify all the spiritist knowledge. So Joanna says in the book, The Awakening of the Spirit, the task of spiritist psychology is to become a bridge between the notable contributions of the studies of eminent psychologists and the spiritist thought, offering them more understanding, illuminating the gaps and abysses of the individual and collective unconscious, to better understand the archetypes, the impulses and tendencies, the conflicts and torments, the aspirations for beauty, for the ideal, the search for plenitude, as a result of the intimate achievements of each being in their long reincarnation climb. And we have Sigmund Freud. Remember, he was born in 1856 and died in 1939. That created psychoanalysis, the father of psychoanalysis, talks a lot about repression impulse, the idea, ego and superego, ego and superego, sexuality, the sexuality, and especially the drive, the sexual drive, in Oedipus complex, just to say a few of Freud's beautiful contributions. And of course, Carl Gustav Jung in 1875, when he is born, and died in 1961, the creator and father of analytical or Jung psychology, talks a lot about symbolism, as we have seen, the symbolic life, images, dreams, imagination, the psyche, ego, self axis, personal and collective unconscious, a lot of what we have been talking about. And Joanna's psychology, it talks a lot about the pillars are learning to know yourself, self-discovery, learning to live, this identification of the collective, learning to be, assuming your own truth, learning to love. So the child is growing from the childish, youthful love to a more mature and full or pacifying love. And this is known, it's in the Gospel according to Spiritism, as we have been talking about. Joanna's item, when she wrote her words, when she writes about patience, she signs as a friendly spirit. So she says, be patient, because patience is also charity, and you must practice the law of charity taught by Christ, sent from God. The charity that consists of giving alms to the poor is the easiest of all. But there is one that is much more painful and consequently much more meritorious, which is to forgive those whom God has placed in our path to be the instruments of our suffering and to put our patience to the test. So I will stop sharing now, and I'll give goodbye to the people that are listening to this, our last meeting, because we are going to stop recording to do a little practice. And if you'd like in the future to be together with us, we will probably continuing just keeping looking to the messages in the WhatsApp group, or enter in contact with Fabricio in Bournemouth Spiritist Association, his center. He was one of the founders. Hi, Fabricio, and he's here now. So talk with Fabricio if you want to go on. And we are going to do some spiritual exercise that I'm sorry cannot be recorded from this point. So everybody that wants to be in the spiritual exercise, just keep with us. And people that are at home, I'll give you a goodbye and hope to see you next year with Fabricio, right, Fabricio?
Yes, thanks, Anaí.
So we just stop recording.